Hi, everyone. Welcome back to my series on sort of the overlooked and underappreciated subgenre of horror, the made for TV horror movie. And thank you so much for joining me tonight. Welcome aboard Cryptfinder Airlines. We are going to be going through a movie tonight. It's a supernatural film, but of the high altitude kind. It kind of begs the question, what happens if there's an ancient evil that happens to be joining you on the red-eye flight? So I want you all to buckle up. In fact, I think the captain has turned on the seatbelt sign. Yes. So please stay seated. Make yourself as comfortable as you can because we are going to be experiencing turbulence of the occult kind. Horror at 37,000 Feet is a 1973 made-for-TV movie. It was directed by David Lowell Rich, who also happened to helm the made-for-TV movie same year, Satan's School for Girls, and both of these films happen to also star Roy Fiennes. The movie revolves around a transatlantic flight from London to New York, which becomes a chilling battle against malevolent forces as a supernatural entity begins to torment the passengers. The story centers on a wealthy architect, Alan O'Neill, who's played by Roy Fiennes. He's transporting part of a druid altar from an old abbey in England aboard a Boeing 747. Now, little does anyone know, the altar, of course, has a dark history. It was used for pagan ritual sacrifices, and now the spirits of those rituals were all there. Well, they're stowaways along for the ride. The presence of the altar on the plane, it awakens this restless, vengeful force that now threatens everybody on board. And as the flight progresses, very strange events begin to unfold. You have icy winds blowing through the cabin. People are found frozen to death, and all the passengers start to panic. To make matters worse, no one on board can really make sense of the supernatural phenomenon except for Paul Kovalak, who's played by the always enigmatic William Shatner. Kovalak was a once revered priest who has since he's lost his faith and he's become somewhat of an alcoholic. Now trapped in this nightmare scenario, Kovalak must confront his own demons and help the passengers fight against this malevolent spirit. But can he regain enough faith in time to save them all? As the tension escalates and the body count rises, the film builds toward a climactic and eerie showdown. It's forcing Kovalak and the remaining passengers to confront this ancient evil in an airborne battle of just willpower and sheer survival. With the plane trapped in this unending cycle of supernatural phenomena. In other words, they keep flying, but they don't seem to be going anywhere. They're just stuck somewhere up in the stratosphere. Well, time ultimately becomes their enemy. And at 37,000 feet, turns out there's nowhere to run. As I mentioned, William Shatner plays Paul Kovalak, and certainly in a departure from his role as the heroic Captain Kirk on Star Trek, Shatner here, he plays an ex-priest who's just haunted by the loss of his faith, and ultimately he's sort of become an alcoholic. He is a broken man racked by guilt and doubt, and it sort of makes his eventual redemptive arc pivotal to this story. Shatner brings an over-the-top, yet riveting intensity to the role, much like he does in many, many roles, but this one is pretty special. It's ended up becoming somewhat iconic in horror circles. Roy Fiennes, as I mentioned, he plays Alan O'Neill. He was most known for his work in the TV series The Invader. Here he plays the rich, skeptical architect, right? He's responsible for transporting this druid artifact, and his disbelief in the supernatural, it makes him, well, one of the more grounded characters, although ultimately his decisions contribute to the unfolding catastrophe. We have Chuck Connors as the captain, Ernie Slade here. He's the calm, collected pilot. He's trying to keep things under control even while all hell is breaking loose around them. Connor's best known for The Rifleman. He brings a sort of steady hand to the cast, right? He's portraying the unflappable nature of a professional, ultimately trying to just save his passengers and get his plane back on the ground. Buddy Ebsen is also in the cast. He's, of course, famous for being in the TV series The Beverly Hillbillies. Here, he plays an elderly businessman caught in the bizarre happenings, and it's quite the departure for him as an actor. Along with Will Hutchins, who plays a cowboy on board, when things start to take a dark turn and it's obvious, yeah, they're all in mortal danger, the two of them are all for human sacrifices as long as that will appease these ancient evil spirits. So it's sort of interesting to see that shift from passengers to mob mentality. It's fascinating. And you also have character actor Paul Winfield. He plays a doctor here. He adds a lot of depth and sympathy as one of the few rational voices aboard this somewhat doomed flight. The film also features a lot of other familiar TV faces, including Tammy Grimes, Lynn Loring, and Jane Marrow. They're rounding out an ensemble of passengers from all different walks of life, but all of them ultimately still trapped in this supernatural nightmare. Horror at 37,000 Feet was part of CBS's successful string of made-for-TV horror movies in the early 1970s, sort of riding that wave of fascination with occult themes and disaster movies that pretty much dominated the decade. Not only was horror sort of coming into its own, but the disaster movie was a huge staple at the time, which that's why you had movies like Earthquake, The Poseidon Adventure, The Towering Inferno, Airport, and all of its subsequent sequels. This film was produced by William Fry. He was a veteran of TV movies, and he also worked on other made-for-TV horror movies like Crowhaven Farm from 1970 and also A Howling in the Woods from 1971. Director David Lowell Rich was also known for his television work. He brings, I would say, a steady hand to directing the chaos on board this flight. The movie was shot with a limited budget, of course, a constraint very, very typical of made-for-TV productions, but the filmmakers find very creative ways to use the sort of claustrophobic airplane setting. You have the tension with the practical effects like fog and lightning and wind machines, all sort of simulating the supernatural occurrences inside the pressurized cabin. Though some effects might seem sort of dated by modern standards, they were very effective enough, at least at the time, to create this sort of spooky atmosphere. It keeps the audiences really kind of glued to their screens. One of the film's memorable aspects is the tension between William Shatner's character and the supernatural force. His performance, it's criticized for being melodramatic, but as I said, it's gone on to gain somewhat of a cult following just due to the, let's say, intense and often bizarre acting choices that Shatner chooses. In the grand tradition of 1970s horror, though, the film, I mean, it's certainly unsettling in some ways, but let's also say it kind of leans into some of the campy elements, which makes it just a hell of an entertaining ride. Though it may not have the lasting cultural impact of some other 1970s horror classics, Horror at 37,000 Feet, it definitely stands out in the niche of made-for-TV movies, specifically just because of its surreal combination of disaster and supernatural horror genres. It helps solidify the formula for the TV horror movie, emphasizing strong ensemble cast, you've got supernatural mystery, and also that claustrophobic setting to help maximize the tension. Its success paved the way for other similarly themed films, which continued to find new ways to just stretch the limits of network TV horror. Despite its initial mixed reaction, the film has gone on to develop a cult following. This is due in part to the performance of its cast, especially William Shatner, whose larger-than-life delivery has become legendary. Twilight Zone fans will remember that Shatner starred in one of the most beloved episodes of the series, Nightmare at 20,000 Feet. We've gone from nightmare to horror, and we've gained a little higher altitude, but at least William Shatner is there to make this a pretty fun experience. It clocks in at only 73 minutes and offers a very rare slice of 1970s charm. This film definitely taps into the sort of experimental spirit of the 1970s, where you've got the quirky mix of supernatural suspense and disaster tropes, making it sort of a beloved oddity. Fans of vintage TV horror flock to Horror at 37,000 Feet mainly because of its blend of camp and supernatural intrigue and a nostalgic look back at a time when television took a lot of creative risk in the horror genre. It's a prime example of how made for TV movies weren't just throwaway entertainment. They were their own breeding ground for memorable scares and very unconventional storytelling. So, there you have it. We took a look at the airborne chills of Horror at 37,000 feet. So, whether you're a fan of occult mysteries or disaster scenarios, or frankly, you just love seeing William Shatner at his most eccentric, well, then this film delivers in spades, and I hope you seek it out. It's a perfect example of 1970s TV horror at its campy best, and it's well worth revisiting for fans of the genre. So, I hope you'll come back and join me next time. Be sure to like and subscribe so you're updated for all the new episodes that are going to be coming out. And as always, stay curious and stay scared.